Tall Tales. The Nymph Symphony.
Chapters.
Chapter 9. Revelation. The village coughed its way back to life. The dry midnight winds helped extinguish the many pocket blazes throughout the smoky old town. Villagers were pouring onto the streets from the tavern's large bolted doors, investigating the damage done to their tranquil beach town. The village vaguely illuminating under the dim, cloudy skyline, forged from the lighthouse's faint radial white shine. The eclipse was still prevalent here, but with the king in the lighthouse safeguarding the townspeople were safe to venture out, rejoicing upon the timid but gradual realization that all the gnolls had gone. I watched them help one another, sharing and exchanging what little they had with each other, donating the extras to those who were in most dire need of it. Helios's recovery effort was fast to arrive, coming through the bright blue portal sustained by Camilla, who had a hand pressed against the marble stone, the very contraption her husband had built for her, which had ironically proven to be his greatest undoing. The portal revealed the beautiful sight of daylight, which reflected off the sandstone pillars and gray concrete steps of our castle's Parliament courthouse. A leisurely daytime we could simply walk back to while the townsfolk here painstakingly limped on to restore all they had lost. Appearing tall, narrow, and misleadingly frail from the far distance I was away, that translucent white marble stone was burning in overdrive. Its center a puddle-sized vertical manhole that glimmered from bright to dark, its carved incantations burning a bright wavy blue aura around it, as it struggled to cope with the cargo load blocking the castle's light, as soldiers carted through crates of supplies 2 by 2. Milena kept a keen eye on me and her injured son, and I could tell she wanted to approach her children, but the townsfolk were keeping her distracted, swarming around her and offering their most heartfelt appreciations for saving their humble little town. "You can step aside now," one of Milena's full-plated knights kindly said to me. He was standing with another knight, patiently waiting to attend to the prince, who was still backed up in the corner, lying against the bent-over gates. Anara checked over Arlo one more time before getting up and allowing the knights to help him instead. "We'll take him to the doctor," said that same kind knight, helping the other man to carefully lift up their prince. "Come on, Arlo. Suck it up. You're barely even hurt," he said with a short, stifled laugh, trying to reassure him that he'd be fine as he and the other 2 knights gently ushered him through the gates and slowly uphill towards the manor's main steps. Mayor Reuben was already making his way down the hill, failing to mask his devastation over the burned wreckage that was his once peaceful town. He gave the prince a deep look of concern as he passed on by him, although his eyes were mostly focused on inspecting what little was left of his town. I could see he was struggling to remain positive as he walked towards the lighthouse's steps, greeting his citizens and seeking permission through the royal entourage to speak directly with the queen, no doubt wanting to offer his gratitude for her coming to the town's aid. I decided to follow after the prince and the 2 guards accompanying him. I spared a glance back to Akoni and Anara by the gates, feeling the awkward tension between them as their eyes glanced everywhere but towards each other. I really felt for Akoni. He was a man who could lecture a courtroom full of people without fear, but when it came to talking to the princess, he became a shy, stuttering mess. I silently cheered Akoni on, hoping he was about to divulge his true feelings to Anara. I noticed how he seemed to be the only one talking, as I was already a fair distance up the hill and couldn't hear what he was saying. But knowing how Akoni got around Anara, I was guessing it was a lot of uncontrolled babbling. Anara politely smiling, waiting for him to take a breath. It was a welcoming relief, at least, to see how fast things could revert back to being civilized. That is, up until I spotted Milena staring at me from in front of the lighthouse, her eyes practically burning into my skull, no doubt blaming me for everything that had happened so far. I watched her ignore the mayor's greetings, probably unaware of who he even was, as she then started walking towards Anara. I pressed a hand to my mouth, gasping as Akoni continued chatting to her daughter unsuspectingly, somehow blissfully unaware of the hurricane heading his way. I knew Anara could endure her mother's wrath, but I was worried about Akoni, the innocent, unsuspecting bystander who was about to be caught between heaven and hell. But determined to keep vision on my prince as well, I was blocked by the entrance of the hill, having turned into the garden ferns of the patio that were almost completely obstructing my view and making me, unfortunately, incapable of looking towards Akoni and Anera anymore. And so, I neared the front villa porch steps, planning to move closer to Arlo and his mother's loyal knights. A rush of country girls then dashed past me, running up the villa's steps to get inside and see Arlo too. So after being swallowed by this crowd, I decided to walk around the side of the villa instead, dragging my fingers along the exterior brick wall, glancing into each window to try and catch a glimpse of him instead. All I wanted to know was that he was in the doctor's safe hands. After everything we'd been through, I wouldn't be abandoning him until I knew he was definitely okay. It took me looking through 4 windows before I saw him. He was lying on a table, with his armor off and his chest exposed. The doctor's fireflies fluttering across his body, mending cuts into small scars and treating his bruises as he received the world-class treatment I had been entitled to 1 full day prior. It was a fascinating sight for all the townsfolk inside to see. The door was crowded by these royal groupies, all trying to peek through and peer over each other's heads. The 2 loyal knights completely overburdened as they tried to hold everyone back while the doctor worked on revitalizing the prince. Arlo's undershirt was torn to shreds, and his once polished shoulder plate lay on the floor beside him, almost cracked beyond repair with at least 2 of Eris's small knives still embedded into it. He had shallow cuts and bruises all over him, but otherwise he seemed for the most part unharmed. So surprised by it, I started to disbelieve the very nature of his injuries, despite having seen the fight unravel firsthand. I was always used to him having been 1 step ahead, and it was unusual to see him look as lost and defeated as he appeared to be. Enough to make me wonder if such small injuries were intentional, and if Arlo had chosen to take non-fatal strikes, rather than risk losing his footing by dodging them in the fight. Evident of a man who possessed the very death wish many other soldiers rumored he had. I wondered if this would be a strength or weakness for a great fighter to possess. To be so hard to kill simply because he had no fear of death, or if it were simply the opposite and made him too unreliable to lead in command. What problems it would cause to have such a self-destructive king when his time came to rule. It was a troubling thought to think, but it was also a scary truth I had to rightfully consider when his turn to reign would eventually come. But whatever the prince felt inside, what he portrayed on the surface was what mattered most. And to these residents and groupies present, he was our hero. Somebody who acted righteously and selflessly in defense of their town. I had no doubt there were rumors already spreading about him single-handedly defending the villa and all the injured occupants inside, all at the cost of being wounded himself. A lie many would ignorantly choose to believe over the real truth. All of us who had to come in just to save him from his own careless actions. And although I knew much of my thoughts were coming from my jealousy to admit that he did deserve at least some of the applause he was about to receive, I knew this wasn't going to change him for the better and make him less reckless, seeing as he had finally earned the respect he'd yearned for all these years, because that need for recognition and approval was a bottomless pit incapable of ever being filled. It was an insatiable burning ambition that would only push him to the limit until it would eventually kill him. So looking through the window at him being placed onto a bench, the doctor's improvised operating table, it took me only 1 deeper look into his depressed face to invalidate all dark thoughts of him finding any thrill in this attention. Strangely, he had no look of self-satisfaction or pride from the bloody battle that he had just victoriously walked out of. He just stared blankly at the dried blood on his hands, lost in his thoughts, unaware of the very cheery squad trying to push past Melena's nightly guards just to get a closer look at him. I was about to turn around and go inside to try and cheer him up when Ebony broke through the crowd to hug and hold him. In turn, he seemed to brighten up a bit at her presence, and so reluctantly I decided to leave them both alone. With 2 free hands and a desire to help these townsfolk, I wandered away from the manor and began heading back down the hill to look for a task to do. I took a moment to admire the cove's huge halo cave roof and its peaceful midnight waves. The past 2 nights had been an enormous journey for me. Words were too limited to express how amazing I felt for having learned more about the world I was a part of. To see landscapes and towns I had only ever read about. To embark on my own adventure for the first time and be rewarded with the gratitude of 100 happy families still together and safe. I was starting to think about staying in Ambervale for a few days. Many nymphs would be homeless and needing help to rebuild. I was good with my hands and I knew I could be used to the town's recovery efforts, especially in this darkness where my shadows could reign supreme. But there was something compelling me to go back home. Something felt wrong. There were too many unanswered questions that puzzled me. It seemed unbelievable Midas could get away with such obvious deceit for so long. That Lord Aris would risk swearing fealty to another when half of his people relied on the capital for board and shelter. And although it was plausible that Midas was capable of creating some portable device that can artificially mimic what his wife can do naturally, I just wasn't sure about everything I'd seen blended together. So still overlooking the cove from the cliff face of the high-rise estate, I watched soldiers queuing up at Camilla's gateway portal, preparing to return home. I could see Arlo walking out the doors with Ebony by his side to the left of me. He was all healed up, but still slouching while Ebony guided him back down the pathway towards a long line of men and women ready to portal back home. My instincts driven to do nothing else but follow them.